Now, I've been thinking for a while. Warcraft used to be way more badass. It used to be cool back in the day. Even the name, Warcraft. The developers picked it because it was cool. And it does sound cool. Let's be honest. Warcraft. It has a ring to it. Kind of like Warhammer, you know? It just goes there. But it used to be cool. Now it's just whatever flavor of MCU, Game of Thrones season 8, the head writer decides to eat in the morning and then come up with those dumb ideas to write this. Now you can make a point that I mean it is downstairs faulty. It was cool under Afrasiabi or whatever. Kinda. It was a good go in the good direction. It was going where it should be. But it didn't get there. And that's a problem. But let's talk about when Warcraft was really cool. And no, I'm not talking World of Warcraft. That kind of cut it out a little. Cut out the coolness and stuff. No, we're talking about truly cool moments. And for that, well, we have the trilogy of RTS games that spawned this entire series. And it seems that nobody really plays them. Or ever played them. Or understood the story behind them. Because people are morons. And the best way to complain about World of Warcraft is to ignore the parts that really matter and not focus on the parts that don't matter in the end. Whatever. Okay, now that pause aside until I open my cigarette, let's start with the most cool thing. You have orcs versus humans. There was nothing cooler than that back then. They wanted to make a Vietnam some sort of game back in the day, but who cares about that? Now you had orcs versus humans, and it was simple. It made sense. Orcs are invaders, humans are defenders. Orcs want to destroy everything in sight and control the planet or whatever. Humans, they kind of want to live. They want to continue living on. It makes sense, like every species does. But yeah, that was a cool concept. And the fact that the orcs were evil and they were so inspired by Warhammer made things more... They made it appealing for the age it came out. Like, I remember from an RTS standpoint back in the day, like, the best RTS at that point was Dune 2. While Westwood was working on Command and Conquer during that time. And there were maybe like another 2 RTS games that came out since Dune 2 until like Warcraft 1, which doesn't really make sense. It was an amazing genre, and well, the developers saw that and they've created this. They even made the story from scratch, from nothing. Can you believe that? They made it in a recording room, and that's how we got those voice lines that I have on my channel if you want to watch. Haha, of course. Yeah, and they basically Warcraft 1 was a passion project inspired by Warhammer, I mean, and Dune 2, and created this awesome badass game, which from a technical standpoint, it doesn't hold up to today. It's not the same thing. Yeah. We get it. It's not modern. It doesn't have the highest graphics. So back then it was enough. And to be honest, it still kind of is enough for the game you're getting. The concept was cool in itself, made from scratch from cool things, and it was a cool thing in itself. It really was, honestly. Like, as I said before, orcs bad, humans good. Pick. You want to play the evil orcs? Well, we got that option. This is one of the few times you get to play an evil character in a video game. Before it became more common in today's geopolitical, social political, whatever, the age. It used to be a rare thing back in the day that you could play the bad guy. And the most interesting fact about Warcraft's one story was that it was parallel. It wasn't like 2 different events happening. It was one event happening, but in different worlds, if you may will. Oh, a multiverse, huh? Yeah, I know. The Marvel and comic books things are there in the beginning, but Marvel and DC aren't really the first guys that went to the multiverse thing. There's also Elric that goes a little bit in the multiverse, but it's a little bit more complex than that, and other things. But you know, it makes sense. You could have the bad guys win the war and destroy Stormwind, or back then as it was known, Azeroth. I think a name they should have stuck with, but whatever. No, that was cool, you know? Or you could play as the humans and defend Azeroth and destroy the orcs, the invading orcs. Huh? That's a pretty cool concept, to be honest. Let's take individual moments of Warcraft 1. Here's an example of some cool moments. You go on to save an important hero for Azeroth that was captured by orcs, who apparently the band of orcs have a female... No, a band of ogres, excuse me, a band of ogres who apparently have a female orc with them. Now that's just strange. You also get to kill one of the strongest and most powerful wizard in the whole world in Medieval, and it's kind of badass. This is the thing, this is what made Warcraft badass since the beginning. This is what made it cool. This was what attracted people. Now, moving on a little bit, let's also present something from the Horde. You get to enact revenge on that. And you find out that Griselda as well, the daughter of Blackhand, that decided to run with some ogres that came with them. So, you know, you can't really let things lay down, because why would you? Even the endings are cool when you look about it. You become the war chief of the Horde, the king of, or whatever big general, I forgot. I will have to rewatch that, of Azeroth, and it's cool. You get an awesome reward at the end. You as the general, commander, war chief, whatever, get to a pretty nice and high position. Later on, they kind of imply that Ogrim Doomhammer is that commander, but we're gonna ignore anything else besides the RTS games for this. Now let's go on to something cool, and what was basically my first RTS ever, and that's Warcraft 2. Tides of Darkness and Beyond the Dark Portal. Those were some amazing games. Now, mechanically speaking, they took what made Warcraft 1 good, amazing, and they made it even more cooler. Now you had naval combat in there, and the story was no longer two separate universes. It was one universe, but events happened differently in the story. The orc side happened maybe after or before, or the human side, huh? That's a pretty cool concept. I gotta be honest, I like it. It makes sense. It's pretty nice. You also get hero units in that one, like Uther, Duralian, Illyria. I think you also get Ronin. No, you don't get Ronin. You get the Khadgar, for example. Then you also get people like, what was the ogre's name? Cho'Gall. You get I think you get Kilrog. If I remember, you get Kilrog. You get Turn Gorefield. It's amazing, and it's more cool because now it's not only orcs versus humans, but it's orcs versus humans and elves. The orcs get some new friends in the form of what are they called? Trolls. Yeah, forest trolls join the Horde to fight against the humans and the elves. The story gets bigger after they've canonized the fact that the orcs won in the first game. Now the human refugees are going to other kingdoms and asking to form an alliance, something that could work, you know, because the Horde is a pretty big threat, and the more people it has, the worse it is for the rest of humanity. And they pull up and they create this alliance. You even get to pick nations at some point, what nation you want to play as. You get amazing stuff, and the stakes are even higher than before, because now it's no longer just one lowly kingdom in the middle of, well, basically what we know then as nowhere, but, you know, now we have that knowledge. It's no longer just one kingdom. It's a whole alliance of human kingdoms, each with their own culture and abilities and specialities. There are elves and dwarves and the gnomish engineers that create contraptions. Yeah. The goblins join up the forces with the Horde. I think it was the Steam Widow cartel, and Lord, they confirmed it or not? Who cares? The goblins join forces with the Horde, and the ogres, they can become now magis. Magis, that's weird. Mages. What's wrong with me? Magis. Whatever. the game just upped the stakes even with naval combat. You get dragons if you play as the Horde. I also get Griffin Riders if you play as Alliance, but dragons are a bit cooler in my point of view. A little bit, you know. And also, dwarves riding griffins is also nice. It's an amazing game that just raises the stakes, raises everything. And it makes Warcraft even more cooler. But what happens after that? Well, things change a little. And you kind of see them change and start to change. Once Warcraft 2 is done, there are some bits of the story that become... how should I say it? Not forgotten, but... what was the proper term for this? I can't remember right now. But it's some... Yeah, they change. In a weird way. Because in Warcraft 3 follows the story a little bit different. It's not exactly immediately after the Warcraft 2. Like Warcraft 2 was the Warcraft 1. There's a time skip in between. And Warcraft 3 is one of my favorite games besides Dawn of War 2. And I'm gonna have to be critical of it for this because it's from this point that Warcraft starts becoming a little bit less cool. It's still gonna be cool, trust me. We'll get there. But it's not as cool. So to talk about the game, during Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3, there's a period of years that passes, and we get some novels, I think, in between. We get The Last Guardian, which is the story of Khadgar and Medivh. Day of the Dragon, the story of Ronin Veressa, one of Alira's sister. And then we get not The Last Guardian, a Lord of the Clans, which basically is which basically means the Horde has a new war chief. And that's kind of where it hits off pretty badly. Now, when you open up Warcraft 3, you get to play as Thrall and the Orcs. And you see, there's a little bit of a development change. Well, the Orcs were evil and, well, they also had their own motives and stuff in the previous games. Now that Thrall is war chief, the Orcs kind of get weaker and less cool to say. Like, let's get to this. In Warcraft 2, it's canon that the humans win bigly to go to Great Man. They win bigly. And because they win, the spoils go to the victor. And thus, well, they capture a bunch of orcs and decide what are they going to do with them. Now, some people from the Alliance presume that it's a good idea to, you know, get rid of the invasion. But the more pacifist side decided that, you know, let's make them prisoners. Now, some people will falsely claim that they were slaves, but they weren't. They were prisoners. That's about it. I mean, they didn't do nothing. They just stood there in their pens and did nothing. Besides the point. And they stand in the internment camps, and there they suffer from the lethargy. The lethargy of the orcs. Which basically makes them uncaring, unmoving. They basically suffer from a sort of depression that affects them race-wide. It's like they're somehow all mentally linked together, and you know, they just all fall into depression at once. Kind of like the Protoss, how they're all linked together and they hear the voice of the Kala or whatever it was, but worse in this case. But then comes this new hero that has his own story, and I'm not gonna get into it. There's a lot of lore videos on Thrall and his story, which is cool in its own right, I give them that. But here comes and decides to change the way of the Horde, and they change it by going back to their shamanistic roots, because they apparently had them. Oh, that's good. It works. It was explained in some manuals. It works. So they go back to shamanism. But they go from this active force that was invading and on the point of destroying humanity, as it was known back then in the kingdom, in, well, the continent, to a bunch of people that fight only if need be. If only to defend themselves and, well, technically nothing else besides that, but you know. The prologue, where you play as Thrall, has an important, well, part to play in the game, because it teaches you some of the lore of what happened in between, the fate of at least one of the characters you could play in, what was it called, in Warcraft 2. And it also kind of teaches you the new gameplay, which mechanically wise, it's different from Warcraft 2, but it's a good improvement from that point, and I think it's one of the things that makes Warcraft 3 a game that survived decades without, or a decade, some years there, without Blizzard interfering at all, until they decided to screw it up and release patches and Reforged. But screw Reforged, that pile of garbage shouldn't exist. Next, we're gonna move. I'm not talking about the story just yet, because we'll get there. Next, you get to play as one of the most important characters in the Warcraft universe, and one of the best characters ever written, Artis Menethil. And you go through his journey of rise and fall. Well, mostly fall, because he rose before the game started. Unfortunately, we didn't get to observe that in the game. But you go through his story when he fights the undead and he fights demons, and he's going to the path to make sure that his people don't suffer. He corrupts himself with a blade known as Frostmourne, and the next following story is still about him as an undead working for the undead leaders. That just so happened to bring in a huge demonic invasion into the world. That happens sometimes, I guess. What can you do, huh? At the end of the day, what can you do? Well, not that much, as you all know. Then the next stories are pretty much more boring. There's the story of the Orcs who reach Kalimdor, a new continent, and they're trying to settle there. Grom Hellscream decides to drink the blood of demons again. They've canonized him being the first to do that in the main series, and he does it again. Thrall purges him of that, and they defeat a huge demon that corrupted their people from the beginning, and is responsible for the state of the Orcs at war that they were in Warcraft 1. Pretty nice. Next, we get some Elven story with the Night Elves that fight both humans and Orcs that have allied, or refugee humans, and they defeat the giant of demon invasion alongside the human and the Orcs, and that's the gist of it. Now, I'm excluding the Frozen Throne campaign for this one right now, but we'll get there. The story is cool in itself, and especially the character of Artis, which is a character that many people liked. I'm not joking. Most people that are into gaming but never tried Warcraft, they know of Artis. A lot of people know of Artis, and you will be surprised how many people know of him. And how epic that Wrath of the Lich King cinematic was, or his cinematic when he climbs the Frozen Throne in the expansion, the Frozen Throne, to become the Lich King. It's an amazing experience, and Artis' story is like the best part of whatever Blizzard did with in Warcraft 3. Unfortunately, there's the story of Thrall, which at this point it doesn't start as a big problem in Warcraft 3, but it'll become a big problem once we move from RTS games to MMORPGs. Or MMOs at this point, because the RPG part is kind of dead. Yeah. The Night Elf part is also cool. They introduce a new race into the mix, which technically has connections to the High Elves that we get to play in Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3. But besides the point, what I think Warcraft 3 makes less cool is that it tries to be different, but also maintain the same spirit. And in a way, I feel like they don't manage to do both of them at once. It's hard to make the proper balance while you're trying to go in another direction. From my understanding, during the point of the development of Warcraft 3, Blizzard was already working on World of Warcraft, and Chris Metzen was working on the stories at the same time. So it's understandable why I think Warcraft 3 is less cool and less badass than its predecessors. But it makes sense. They had resources for this, but They were also working on other stuff. If that story is true and I'm not just making it up, take things with grains of salt, please. Seeds of salt. That's the best option. But it fails to encapsulate what made the other two games great. And the orcs feel nurtured. Like they have their... Yeah, okay, I'm way long into this video, I can just say it. It feels like they have the balls cut off. And the humans, oh, they seem pretty cool and are doing good. Oh, and the humans have to suffer. Because, of course they do. You know, when we're starting a new series years after, the humans have to suffer. Because it makes sense for not only the humans, the Alliance has to suffer for that to happen. It happened in Warcraft 1, yeah, but that was the catalyst. And then they get screwed over in Warcraft 3. Huh. You understand what I mean? The Alliance is treated now as more victim of circumstances and of abuse of... not even power, I could say, and abuse of corruption. And not the people that just got struck first and retaliated as fast and as strong as they could without mercy. Well, in Warcraft 2 until the end, but you know, screw that. No, they just get screwed over and we move on. And it's not only like the human kingdom you play as, Lordaeron, gets screwed over. Dalaran, the mage kingdom of this universe, also gets screwed over because you attack it. The elves get screwed over, but that's the most interesting part. What they managed to make cool with RTS, they managed to bring the Alliance side into a more redundant spot where they really just get blown out of water. They're fighting an even more alien force than what you would think they have a solution for stuff like this, because, you know, they fought the orcs for a while. They saw that the orcs had necrolytes and what are they called again? Death Knights, and they could have been prepared to fight a force that was a little bit at least similar to what they fought. No, they just get blown off the water and the Alliance gets destroyed from all sides, especially the elves, which story-wise the elves quit on the Alliance and they decided to go more on the isolationist route than anything. And there you meet the third Windrunner sister, Sylvanas Windrunner, who, by the way, she deserved what she got. There's no joke about it. If you've played those missions with her, those missions where you fight against her, she deserves every bit of what she got. Yeah, then no, that she deserved that. Whatever Sylvanas fans may say, no, Sylvanas deserves what she got. Play Warcraft 3 and you'll understand. Going back, the Alliance is screwed over and the Horde is nurtured. Then what does that mean for the other two playable races they've just introduced? The Undead are an unstoppable force of nature that barely anything could stop. There was one thing that could stop the Undead in the game, and somehow the Undead passed that. Like when the Undead attack Dalaran and you play as Artis with a Lich named Kel'Thuzad, whatever, I'm not getting to that story right now. The Dalaran creates a huge barrier, anti-undead barrier, but you get to pass through it because you lose life points gradually. And you kind of destroy the kingdom of mages. Yeah. That was the only thing that could stop them. Now, the Night Elves, one of the new races. And one of the race concepts that I pretty much liked. I regret that they didn't go with the fact that one Night Elf, can have multiple wives. That would have been interesting, but whatever. What can you expect? Anyway, the Night Elves are an interesting and mystical race, and mythical, and they're pretty cool. Their story, the War of the Ancients, is amazing. It's a good backdrop into their race and into who they are and why they're so protective of Kalimdor and the forest they live in. But not even they are a strong force to fight against the undead, which technically they should be, but the undead are just stronger in themselves. So thus they need to ally with the humans and the orcs to defeat the demons and the undead. And it's reasonable. They could barely defeat the demons. The demons and the undead are a bigger problem. And that's their story. The original two factions are neutered and screwed over by whatever happens to them, and the other two new ones are the strongest in the game. And you see, this is a little bit of a problem because in Warcraft 1 and Warcraft through Warcraft 2, there was a balance of units. Units were balanced, almost equal in a sense. In this one, units have different life points, attacks, defense, which, okay, makes sense and is a good way to balance things around spells and other stuff. But it doesn't feel like they're equal anymore. You see? And especially the story doesn't present it as being equal anymore because the undead just roll over everything. It doesn't matter if it's Horde, human, or Night Elf. They just roll through things like an unstoppable avalanche. And that kind of destroys the balance that the first two games created. Because while the Orcs were the invading force and they were strong and they managed to destroy Stormwind or Azeroth, and then the second game they managed to reach the gates of Lordaeron, they get kind of messed up because at the end they still lose. And that's the important part. And even in the lore and the manuals for the games, you learn that the Orcs, as strong as they are and as monstrous as they may be, have met their match against the humans. Because the humans can reach them and fight them blow for blow. That's not really a thing that happens with the undead, who just seem weak only to bide their time and corrupt, well, the Prince of Lordaeron, Artis. And that's where the balance and structure of the factions gets messed up, because the undead are so overpowered in the story that it dwarfs the Alliance and the Horde and the, well, technically the factions that we started liking once you got into Warcraft. The cool factions get dwarfed by okay, let's be honest, undeads are pretty cool in Warcraft. We're gonna give them that. By a cool faction that is technically a strange thing, a new thing, and one thing you don't know what to think about. Now, on the other side, the Night Elves are also perceived to be very strong, and lore-wise, it's kind of shown in the campaign and stuff. But again, they're not enough to fight against the undead. It's like a clash of an immovable object and an unstoppable force with these two. The only thing is that the unstoppable force is even more unstoppable than the object is immovable, if that makes any sense. And thus the clash is still always in favor of the undead. But then you might be wondering, why do I have this problem when I like the way the story and everything happens in Warcraft 1 and 2? The solution is, well, the idea is simple, because in the end of it, they were still on equal terms. Yes, one had an advantage at some point or another, but they were still on equal footing. As I said, the Orcs and the humans could match each other blow for blow. The undead, not so much. So that's why I think makes this less cool, because by the time of Warcraft 3, you're already attached to your certain faction that you like, because you get to play it even online, and you get to experience it more and more the more you play the game and the more you repeat the campaign and do quick challenges and stuff. You get attached to a certain faction, and of course you want your faction, you want to play your faction when the third game comes out, but the third game isn't really split as well as the other two were. It's not a specific human campaign, undead campaign, or whatnot. All the campaigns are mixed together, the same way they do the campaign of Heroes of Might and Magic 3, for example, where there's no different campaign like in the other ones. They're all connected in some way. I know Warcraft 2 is also connected, but the connection feels like you pick human or you pick orc and you go through the route. While in Heroes of Might and Magic 3 and Warcraft 3, the campaign is multiple stories combined into one, not just only one campaign for each individual factions. And I guess that's what messes up a little with that. Sure, it's an amazing concept what they did with Warcraft 3, don't get me wrong. It's still my favorite game. But it destroys that part and made your faction love specific in Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 1. And let's get to the Frozen Throne. God, I've been talking for 30 minutes. And I have no script for this, so... oh well. The Frozen Throne is a continuation to the first Warcraft 3 game, Reign of Chaos. This is an expansion for Warcraft 3. And it can be seen. Like, for example, the first campaign is the Night of campaign. It's a pretty decent campaign of itself, where you hunt Illidan. The next campaign is a human campaign, well, more the Blood Elf campaign, since the Elves rebranded themselves as Blood Elves in honor of their fallen comrades. The next campaign is the Undead one, who unfortunately is split between RTS and Sylvanas. A horrible choice, if you ask me, but whatever. And the final campaign, which isn't really a campaign, is the Orcish one, where the Orcs are building their own home, and they get a new friend under the name of Rexxar. And they go on wacky adventures to defeat part of the Alliance that was still remaining and still had hatred for the Horde, because let's remember what happened to Stormwind the last time the Horde was free. The Frozen Throne gets some of the cool things. It has its cool moments, the same as Warcraft 3 has the cool moments. Its cool moments. But I'm going to talk about the cool moments of these two games, or this game and its expansion, right now. Because we're talking about cool moments. There's the cool moment in Warcraft 3 where you get to purge Stratholme, because there's no other option. And whoever says that what happened in Stratholme was bad and it didn't have to happen, yeah, no, screw you, you're wrong. Going on, there's a point where Artress gets Frostmourne. There's a part with Frostmourne where you embed the High Elves, Dalaran. There's the Orcish part with the Grom Hellscream, which I think is the best part of the Orc campaign, because it really, the way Grom acts is really a throwback to the old games. Amazing, love that. And the Night of campaign, which I enjoy truly. I think the most awesome moment is the final part that ends Warcraft 3 with the death of Archimonde. From the Frozen Throne, a cool moment is in the beginning, Illidan raising the Nagas. That's pretty cool. Illidan using the Eye of Dalaran, I think it was, to melt Icecrown. The Icecrown Glacier in Northrend, which houses the Lich King. Another cool moment is Kel'Thas saying that line that he has to defeat the undead with the sticks and harsh language. The undead one, of course, it's everything related to Artress, and what's not cool is everything related to Sylvanas. And then there's the Rexxar part. The Rexxar part tries to be this interesting thing where they move more on the Diablo-like thing, but you control multiple members, well, multiple heroes at once. And it's interesting in of itself. As a whole, I really enjoy it, and I recommend that if you're gonna ever touch Warcraft 3 but you don't want to deal with micromanaging units and armies and buildings, or macroing it for that point of a matter, I recommend playing Rexxar's campaign. It's very good and it's nice, and by the time of like the half of the first act and the rest of them, it really pulls in everything that was good about the previous two games, Warcraft 2 and 1, because there you have it again. The fight between the Horde and the Alliance, because of course the Alliance will never forgive what happened to Stormwind, and the Orcs escaping the internment camps after eating all that tax money. Yeah, the tax money was one of the reasons some nations left the Alliance. They had enough of paying taxes to take care of orcs that killed their brothers and sisters and whatever, and families, you know? Makes sense, I guess. It harkens a lot to the old two games. Even at the end, you know that, well, Archimonde was defeated, and now there's technically a peace between the humans and the orcs. It won't last. And as you can see later on, it doesn't last. And that's a cool part about Warcraft. Because Warcraft at its best is when it's about the war between the two factions. And especially when the factions are balanced. The campaign of Warcraft 3 is good. It's amazing. I love it. That's why I love the game. But it's not as cool and as badass as the first two games. Until, well, the orcs and humans start fighting each other again in, what was it called? In the Rexar campaign. That's when it becomes good. That's when it becomes amazing again. And it harkens back to the old days when it was good. If you exclude Thrall's desire for peace and alliances and diplomacy and whatever. If we ignore just Thrall and we focus on the fight and the story and the implications between why the humans and the orcs are fighting again, it's good. It's amazing. And it really is good that they made something as cool and as badass as it once was. Now, Warcraft 3 wasn't as cool as the other two. As amazing as it wasn't as cool and as badass as Warcraft 1 and 2. But it was these moments, like in the Rexar campaign, or in the beginning of the Human campaign in Warcraft 3, where you're fighting orcs. These moments, these throwbacks to the old games, and the story that is there, the implications, everything. It works, it makes... Well, it's not as cool, it really presents that it can be, and it is, and it has its own thing. It diverges from what the originals did, and I might not like that, but it creates something unique and amazing in of itself. And that is what works for Warcraft. That's what makes the RTS cool. Because at their time, both Warcraft 1 and Warcraft 2, they were different from everything else that was at that point releasing. I think it was, there was Red Alert was released during the time of Warcraft 2. Warcraft was always different. It was always cool. It always had these moments where you had your faction loyalty, where you had those fights where both sides were equal in power, even though some won more than others because of certain circumstances or strategies. It felt more real, more realistic, more natural in a way. And Warcraft, as I said before, they've always worked with the Warcraft games always stood out as something new, something innovative, something cool, something badass. Even as I said in the beginning of the video, the name itself, they picked it because it sounded cool. Warcraft. They managed to drive things in a way that nobody did before, and it was amazing. It was the cool stuff. And let's not forget a few things. The guys that worked on the original games, they were geeks, they were nerds, they were people that created a game that markets itself towards people like them and towards a huge demographic of, well, boys and girls, let's say that, of people that enjoy that sort of new thing, that sort of amazing strategy and everything that it encompasses. There's a bunch of D&D references in the original 2. Not even the original 2, in the first Warcraft, if I remember well, with one of the demons. But that aside, things were amazing. It was created by people that knew what they loved, and they created what they love for people that also love the same thing. Because our demographic was huge. Who doesn't like orcs? Who doesn't like humans fighting orcs and other stuff like that? It's amazing, especially the whole Lord of the Rings influences. Because let's not forget, there's a lot. There are Lord of the Rings influences in Warcraft. It would be foolish to pretend there aren't when they are there. Most fantasy things are based on Tolkien's works. It worked, and it made Warcraft cool. This was a time when things were as they should be. Without people crying about some troll being an illiterate. Without people crying that calling what are they called, hybrids of two races, half-blood is racism and stuff like that. It was a time of amazement and cool stuff. It was a point that really deserved, a point in life that truly should be experienced. And if you need to throw away all those things mainstream media and the hellscape named Twitter talk about every day, and appreciate them for what they truly are, for how amazing they are. Still to this day, I recommend people play the original 3 RTS Warcraft games because they're good. They're amazing. And while Warcraft 3 goes on a different path, it's still worth a play. Especially if you do it in order, because that's the proper story of the game. Whatever other nonsense they've made with World of Warcraft nowadays and how they ruin the story with Shadowlands, that's irrelevant. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, because we still have this. And yes, it's true, Blizzard butchered Warcraft 3 with Reforged in a stupid manner. Where there's a will, there's a way when it comes to that game. Oh yeah, I should also talk about Reforged, but I don't consider Reforged an important part of this. What Reforged is... Okay, so talking about Reforged, Reforged is sickening. It's disgusting. And the fact that once Reforged released, it kind of acted like a parasite and installed itself over your original Warcraft 3, thus meaning you no longer had access to it. Yeah, screw you, Blizzard, for that. Warcraft Reforged, whatever, follows the same story as Warcraft 3. Okay, there's nothing changed in there. Maybe a map or two. But overall, it's the same thing, and there's no point in it. It feels like in the whole scheme of the Warcraft RPGs, that would have been amazing. But no, in the Warcraft RTS series, Reforged stands more as a stain than as anything that should be looked at. One thing I want to talk about is the graphics of Reforged. And boy, this one's gonna suck. To understand my problem with the graphics of Reforged, let's look at the original trilogy of RTS games, the best games. Well, the first one has a more realistic kind of spin to it, in a way, more Warhammer inspired. Warcraft 2 goes on its own route, and it starts with a more... It's a mixed style from what they started with and what they will reach eventually with Warcraft 3. And Warcraft 3 is a more cartoonish, well, environment and some close to cell shading, I would say. Sort of the comic book styled thing. But it works for the game, and it really makes the original Warcraft 3 feel ageless in a way. Even though the polygons and stuff are telling, but you know, graphics aren't everything in a game. What Reforged does is weird graphic-wise, because it takes a more realistic approach to the game and to its graphics, and thus everything is made to seem more real, like it's more physical than a game it should be. And you could say in a way that the team that was, I think, 1 member or 5, whatever the team was made of, decided to take that part from Warcraft 1 and put it in Warcraft 3 with the hopes of, you know, it reaching its target audience and whatever, making money, stuff like that. I think it fails a lot because it creates, in my point of view, uncanny models of once amazing characters and designs. Though, you know, it comes with the advantages of having more polygons than the first game. Well, what can you do? But it really feels like even the graphics for that are messed up, and they work against the original trilogy that was always always came up with innovations and somehow moving forward and moving what games could be and what RTS games could be. It feels unnatural what happened with Reforged, and that's why I consider it a stain upon it. Good. Now I've talked about the RTS series. I guess I should also talk a little about the World of Warcraft series. And why I think World of Warcraft isn't as cool or as badass or as worthy of replayability, playing, enjoying, whatever you want to call it, as the original RTS series. Okay, so is the change of the genre that really affects it in the first place. Primordially, I was about to say, but no. In the first place is the change of the genre that really affects things. Because it goes from your normal RTS with predetermined story and stuff into an MMORPG with quests and abilities, and you don't control a huge army like you used to do. You now control a character, an avatar of sorts, like in any normal MMORPG. But there is a point I want to talk about with World of Warcraft, is the fact that, you see, the first World of Warcraft, the Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King are badass. They're a badass trilogy. They're not as badass, as good, as cool as the RTS trilogy, but they are good. And they are good from the single one-point perspective and idea. What the World of Warcraft trilogy, the first, the Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King with the vanilla, it's what I'm gonna refer to it. So whatever, blah blah. The World of Warcraft trilogy gives you the ability and power to explore places that you fought on in Warcraft 3. You get to go to those places. You get to enjoy them. You get to see what happened after the battles, after what was left of, after Arthas went into Silvermoon and destroyed their Sunwell. You get to see how those things changed and how they are, and what's the effects of what you did in the RTS series. So at most, that's redundant. Ignore that. The original World of Warcraft trilogy gives you the ability to experience what you've done before on the ground. And I think that's amazing. That's inspiring. That does a lot of good. Sure, the series goes on in a more goofy side, less serious side than what Warcraft 3 went into. But Warcraft 3 still kept itself pretty serious, despite its random and few moments of goofiness. There's more goofy stuff in the World of Warcraft trilogy, and you might enjoy, might not enjoy it. I feel it's a distraction and detraction from, well, the original spirit and sense of the game. Unfortunately, while in the RTS trilogy you commanded great imposing heroes, in the World of Warcraft trilogy you command yourself. Your character has to experience stuff, but also you are not left without cool moments of your own to experience. For example, like PvPs and dungeons, raids, and other such stuff. You really get a feel for things in there. And there are some things that are explored that, well, you could only read about in the original games. Like Magister's Terrence, that we'll find out weirdly about in the Sunwell. And it makes sense. What they've done with the MMO trilogy, yeah, let's call it MMO trilogy, World of Warcraft trilogy, whatever. And the MMO trilogy is create something that was really inspired. You can see in the MMO trilogy, the inspiration that comes from the previous trilogy, from the amazing games and what they laid on the ground. And quite frankly, it's amazing to see this. You also get to see a few other things later on in World of Warcraft's lifespan, but we're gonna ignore that. We're really gonna ignore that, because we want to focus on what made Warcraft cool, what made it badass. And besides the whole reasons I gave until now about the RTS series and the MMO trilogy, it all works together to tell a comprehensive story that, if you stop at Wrath of the Lich King and you stop at the Fall of the Lich King patch, or I think that was what it was called, you have an open end, you have a start and an end to the amazing story that is Warcraft. Because it all builds up to this final encounter with what could destroy the world and what's basically the leader of the unstoppable force that I've talked about in the Warcraft 3 segment part. And it's an amazing battle. It's an amazing battle with an amazing finish. And the finish is kind of sour and sweet at the same time with how it happens. Like, I could spoil it now, but is it really a spoiler if I talk about it? So, what's the point? It's years since it began, since the cinematic launch. So it doesn't matter. This trilogy is what made Warcraft cool, badass. It made it amazing. Whatever happened after in World of Warcraft, well, destroyed, in my point of view, everything that was laid before in these two trilogies. Everything that happened since Cataclysm onwards just puts more, I would say, ash, dirt, or sand in the grave of an amazing trilogy. Yeah, in the grave of an amazing trilogy that created such an amazing universe that inspired and made a lot of people fall in love with it. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a few World of Warcraft expansions that I like and I considered to be really good. Yeah, because they act also again as deviations from what was done before. Like Mists of Pandaria, for example, or Legion or Battle for Azeroth. Say what you want, the story of Battle for Azeroth is awesome. They really went back into their roots and it works. Too bad it became more of a Sylvanas story and stuff and they didn't think things through. You know, and that's why we got Shadowlands, so screw that. There are exceptions to the modern World of Warcraft. Nothing will defeat the original trilogy of RTS games. And that's amazing, as the MMO trilogy is, and for all the good things it creates, and for the good things it lets you explore in this amazing world, the original trilogy, the RTS, is still the most important part. I would say not only in Blizzard's history, but in gaming history and culture. That's how good they are, because people will know what. Once you mention Warcraft, they will know what you're talking about. And some may say, it's because of the MMORPG, Shadowlands, and whatever the expansions are at, Dragonflight, whatever. People knew of artists, and I have many acquaintances that know of Artis and of the Lich King and his rise to the throne and the end of the Frozen Throne. I have very little few people that care about the jailer, about whatever the guy in the Jaina story in Drusvar was, about whatever demon spawn was in about the Nightborn. Yeah, no, I mean the Nightborn and the High Mountain Torrents and Legion. What else was it? Oh yeah, about the alternate universe with the former the former clan leaders. Yeah. There are more people that know about the original trilogy. And I'm not talking about geeks, nerds, and whatever you want. People that are into this scene and know stuff. People outside of it that know it, that either played it once when they were a kid and they haven't done it before. And people that or didn't really touch the series at all. People know about it and they understand it. And it's amazing. There is a legacy and a love that was poured into the original trilogy of RTS games that really works and makes it great. It was cool. It was badass. It was what gaming was at one point. An amazing thing. Unfortunately, they made the MMO trilogy, which, for all it's good, spawned whatever World of Warcraft we have today, and the numerous retcons and story changes that have happened ever since. And I don't like that. I made my displeasure known with current World of Warcraft a lot. I've said it a lot. Especially after the artist cinematic in Shadowlands. Screw whatever made this. Fuck you, Steve Donser. You ruined Warcraft. You're exactly a... Steve, whatever Blizzard is right now is not what it once was. The great things that you could say about Diablo 1 and 2, not the same thing. The great things you could say about StarCraft 1, not the same Blizzard. It's not anymore there. This current Blizzard is exactly what EA is to Ultima. This current Blizzard is to its great IPs what EA was to Ultima. A destroyer of good things. Something that will stain and muddy the memory of something good with cash grabbing, stupid writing, only so they can make a profit and pretend that they like it. Fuck you, Steve Donser. You've ruined Warcraft.